Okay, welcome to our November Hot Topics, where we're going to do a quick review of the local consolidated plan quarterly meeting, which will give everybody the chance to get the updates that we provided and talk about the work we did with the wonderful 50 to 60 people that were able to attend the quarterly meeting on October 23rd, 2019. My name is Tateman. I'm an assistant director with the Special Education and Title Programs team. And along with Doug Boleen and myself, we lead the title side of our team. We started off with an overview of kind of what the day was going to be. We did introductions of KSD staff, had people talk about their goals for the day and introduce themselves at their tables, and then we took questions from the audience that we wanted to try to get addressed during the entire day. We want to remind people of our Kansas vision for education, that our citizens of Kansas are demanding higher standards in academic skills, as well as employability and citizenship skills, and the need to move away from a one-size-fits-all system that relies exclusively on state assessments. This new vision for education calls for a more student-focused system that provides support and resources for individual success and will require everyone to work together to make it a reality. Together, Kansans can. We'd like to remind people that we want Kansas to lead the world in the success of each student. And when we talk about each student, a lot of those students fall within our programs. Our title programs based on our students that are socially economically challenged, our students that may be homeless, migrant, neglected and delinquent, or receiving services in special education. We want all students in Kansas to succeed. This is just a list of the agenda items that we went through over the period of 5.5 hours on that day, and we're going to just do a brief overview of all of these over the next few minutes. Also, we want to remind people of the next two quarterly meetings that we'll be having. The next one will be January 22nd, 2020, and the final one for the school year will be April 8th, 2020. And those both are scheduled to be at the Hutchinson Career and Technical Education Academy at 800 15th Circle in Hutchinson, Kansas. So we started the day talking about the Director's Handbook, and we did a walk through the handbook, which is available at the link here. And when we send this out on our LCP listserv, we'll include all of the links in that listserv as well. We talked about the different sections, as we have a general section of important dates near the front of the handbook, and then we follow up with each section. The dates are specific to that topic. When things are due, reminders of what school districts should be doing and buildings should be doing during these times of the school year. We also talked about the three cohorts, cohorts 1, 2, and 3. Currently in the 2019-2020 school year, we are serving cohort 2. What this means is this is the cohort, if you're listed as your district or your co-op, that you will be doing your fiscal file review, which just concluded the first part of that, or in the spring doing your ESEA consolidated assessment. Cohort 3 will be next year, the 2021 school year, and cohort 1 will again go in the 21-22 school year. These are the years that your district will be monitored. However, any district may be monitored any year based on decisions through information we receive from districts. We will make that decision if districts need to be monitored more often. We also have a section of contacts, who your local consolidated plan contact is. We are currently in the works of replacing one of our staff members who've left. So we still have Teresa White on our contact list. Currently, Doug Boleen, myself, and Carrie Rogers are serving those districts, as well as those districts listed under Stacy Martin. And then the next section is approximately 8 pages. But we like to remind people these are the 8 pages worth of assurances that you have signed off when you have done your local consolidated application. So you're assuring the Kansas State Department of Education and the United States Department of Education that your districts are doing all of the items listed in the assurances. We always like to remind people that at least once a year, you should be reviewing these assurances to make sure you're understanding and accomplishing all of these tasks. If you do have any questions about some of the things in the assurances, feel free to contact any of our staff that works with the local consolidated plan. So now we're just briefly going to talk about what makes a building a Title I eligible building. And one of the keys here, which you'll see this labeled on the next slide, is that these are for districts which have 1,000 or more students in their overall population. So this is not a requirement for districts with 999 students or less to meet these. However, we also like those districts to consider who they're serving based on these percentages. So for a building to be Title I eligible, there are a few different requirements. If a building has 75% or greater poverty level based on what the district has determined their way to figure poverty, which in most cases is free and reduced lunches on the nutrition forms, they are required to be served as a Title I building. On occasion, we do have waiver requests for some of these buildings, and we do have waiver authority in the state of Kansas to waive this if districts that have buildings at 75% or more can show that they're providing similar services with supplemental state funds that are similar to Title I. So if you have schools over 75% that you are not looking to serve with Title I, you need to be working with our offices. For those buildings under 75%, districts may serve based on one of these three areas. If a building is over 35%, they may be served as a Title I building. If they're under 35%, but above the district poverty level, so if the district poverty level is 25%, any building in the district above 25% may be served. Also, districts may look at the grade span poverty level. So if you're looking at serving an elementary school and the elementary school grade span poverty level is 20% in your district and a certain grade school is at 22, you would be allowed to serve them as Title I eligible. The next part of this we want to talk about is the rank and serve. And again, this is for districts with 1,000 or more students. Like before, if they're 75% and above, we're expecting those districts to be served. However, in all cases of districts with 1,000 or more students, the higher the poverty level, the more the per pupil expenditure has to be. So as you go down in per pupil expenditure, it must be meeting the same level as the poverty level. So if you have buildings at 50, 45, and 40% in your district, and you're serving all three, the building with 50% must have the highest per pupil expenditures out of Title I. The one at 45% must have the second highest level, second level poverty level. And the third building, which has the lowest poverty level that you're serving, must have the lowest per pupil expenditure. Our next section is going to be the kiosk self-assessment, which for our title programs has two parts to it. There's the fiscal file review, which happens mostly in the fall, and the program file review, which will happen in the spring. The link on this page, and that will be provided in the email, takes you directly to our kiosk page, which has a lot of excellent resources. And as this states, part of the regular 3-year monitoring, we're currently in cohort 2 for the 2019-2020 school year. The fiscal file review opened in September, and the program self-assessment will open in January. We will be looking for people who self-report things that they're non-compliance, and we really encourage you as you report yourself in non-compliance to start working with our staff to help you get your district into compliance. We also do a random selection of data verification both for the fiscal file review and for this program self-assessment. So now just a general overview of the fiscal file review. The reporting window was September 1st through September 30th, and the areas that were addressed are these 5 below. The key one that I'm going to speak about today is the written policies and procedures. We're finding out a lot of our districts do not have specific written policies and procedures, such as for drawing down funds, for how accounting practices are done, various things like that. We have people that can tell us the policies and procedures, but since they're not written down and under the Every Student Succeeds Act, Uniform Grant Guidance, and EDGAR, they do require these to be written down. So we're encouraging people to work on getting these policies and procedures in written form. This is extremely helpful when we have staff turnover. Most of our districts do not receive charter school funds, so this is a non-issue. The third bullet, we have private school and non-public school funds both listed. Private school participation is what we call it under the IDEA, and non-public school funding participation is what is called under ESEA. We'll do self-assessments of Title 6B under IDEA, and under ESEA, it'll be Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and Title V, and sometimes we include our ESEA competitive grants as part of this process. So at the district level, who should be involved in the review? These are just some of the people that we recommend. What we do not recommend is only one person. Many times we see where one person is trying to answer all these questions, and they really need the support from multiple people across the districts, such as the superintendent, special ed directors, board clerks, our LCP, federal program contacts, and our fiscal manager. It takes a team to do a really good job of answering these assessments. This slide just kind of goes over the basic procedures and again provides a couple different links for those districts. We also encourage on these to make sure that even if you're in cohort 1 and 3 this year and in cohort 2 and other years, that you're always doing these things internally at the district level. So when your cohort is up, you are ready to participate, and this does not take a lot of extra work every 3 years by the district. The Kansas State Department of Education determines the risk based on the answers provided by the district, and we are also looking for timely submission and timely correction. So districts that are late submitting and or making the corrections that are needed to things that are not compliant will be found to be out of compliance with submission and correction circumstances. When it comes to data verification after the self-assessments are done, any district that self-reports non-compliance, we will work with to get them in compliance, and we will also randomly select approximately 20 districts who reported 100% compliance to complete required data verification, such as in the ESEA programmatic, which has approximately 61 questions. We will typically pick between 5 and 10 that we will verify with those 20 districts that they do actually have those materials in their possession to show they are in compliance. Here's another set of resources, one from the Office of Budget Management, the 2019 Compliance Supplement, and then again we have our kiosk web page, which some excellent resources that can be found there are the 3-year cohort list, the Quick Start Guide for administrators, the Quick Start Guide for fiscal file review, and the copy of the self-assessment questions. At our meeting in October, we did supply every district that attended a copy of those self-assessment questions. So now we're going to focus more on what is the ESEA self-assessment that occurs in January. This is a list of 60+ questions across the ESEA programs that districts must answer for every program that they receive federal funds in. So if there's an area of compliance where a district does not receive federal funds, such as non-public schools, some districts do not receive Title III, you will not be required to answer those questions, and the skip logic is built into the electronic format. One of the things we encourage people to do is to make sure, even when your cohort is not up, that you're using these self-assessment questions to make the most of it and be prepared, and using these compliance requirements to help improve the title programs across your school district. There were 3 documents that we handed out some samples and had discussions amongst the table groups and as a group as a whole, such as the Parent School Compact. We wanted districts to be able to see different versions of other schools and have people able to talk about how they're used. The Right to Know letters, they're required to be sent out on an annual basis to districts, letting parents know what their rights are in Title program buildings. And then the 4 weeks letter, which previously most people considered this the non-highly qualified letter. It's really important, our discussion there. We talked about a couple terminologies. Those are listed on here. We're really working with districts to leave these first two terms behind. No Child Left Behind, or NCLB, and highly qualified teacher. Because with the enactment of the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESEA, that is now the current law that we're under. We have some districts that still use the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESEA, and that is perfectly fine, but we need to make sure we're no longer referencing No Child Left Behind in our documents. Also, highly qualified teacher, that specific definition was removed from the Every Student Succeeds Act and changed to a teacher who meets state certification for content and grade level taught, which basically means a teacher needs to have that full state certification at the grade levels and at specific content above elementary school that they may be teaching. So we a lot of times get the question, I have a staff member who has a K-6 elementary license. Is that good enough to teach at the elementary school with Title I? Yes, that would be. However, a substitute's license, apprentice license, those do not meet the teacher who meets state certification standards. So that is when those 4 weeks letters need to be sent out. Whenever we have these staff members that do not have full certification teaching our Title I students for more than 4 weeks, or any teacher in a school-wide building must meet these requirements, or this letter must be sent out to students those teachers are serving. Our next topic is supplement, not supplant. And we went over some of the guidance that's listed here and some of the examples of how districts need to meet supplement, not supplant. One of the keys we want to point out here, this does not affect any program outside of Title I Part A. So Title I Part C, migrant, Title I Part D, neglected and delinquent or at risk, Titles 2, 3, or 4, or any other competitive programs, the supplement, not supplant requirement did not change. The key here is districts must determine a methodology to determine that all their Title I buildings are receiving the same state and local funds as any non-Title I building in their district. The United States Department of Ed has called this Title I neutral, that every building in the districts are getting the same funds they would get whether the district or schools received Title I funding. We strongly encourage you to look at the different examples provided in the guidance. KSDE is not allowed to require a certain methodology, but we will monitor the methodology you provide. And we just want to share with the Every Student Succeeds Act, Section 1118B2, which is under supplement, not supplant. The LEA needs to demonstrate compliance. They shall demonstrate that methodology used to allocate state and local funds to each school receiving assistance under Title I Part A, and ensure that such school receives all of the state and local funds it would otherwise receive if it were not receiving assistance under Title I Part A. So we are assuring that all our Title I buildings are getting the same funding they would whether they were Title I or not. This slide shows a few of the flexibilities that apply to all the following options. LEAs may demonstrate compliance under any of the options on a district-wide or grade span basis. So you can look at supplement, not supplant, comparing all your buildings district-wide or at the elementary level, middle, and high school level. This next bullet is very important, especially for our smaller districts. Any LEA that can demonstrate the following is not required to be able to demonstrate a methodology of compliance. If it has a single school, i.e., the only school in the district is a K-12 building or a K-8 building, one school, they do not have to demonstrate this. Or in any grade span, they only have one school. So if a district has one elementary, one middle, and one high school, they do not have to have a methodology to show this. And LEA can also exclude any supplemental state or local funds spent for programs that meet the intents and purposes of Title I, Part A. And again, we really encourage you to look at that supplement, not supplant guidance if you're a district with multiple buildings at a grade level or multiple elementary buildings being served with Title I funds. The next section that we talked about briefly was our evidence-based practices website. And at this point, we also want to remind people that even though we did remove the K-12 state at risk from the application part of the LCP, it still remains and is an extremely important piece of the LCP annual report. We will be keeping the 8 questions on the annual report as we had this year, and we'll be doing some updates within the next 2 to 3 months to that page once we find out the results from the post-legislative audit to see if there's any adjustments or changes we need to make. But we want to remind people that they will be providing information at the end of the school year in May and early June on how those state at-risk funds were used. The last question on that always talks about our evidence-based practices that districts are required to use with the funding of those state at-risk. And on the evidence-based practices website, we have 4 general sections. We have the purpose, the legal resources, the general resources, and the best practices. And there at the bottom of the page, you have the link to go to that. And again, we will send that out on the LCP listserv along with a copy of this video. So here is the definition of evidence-based. It's any concept or strategy that is derived from or informed by objective evidence that demonstrates a statistically significant effect, most commonly educational research or metrics of school, teacher, and student performance. So on our page, under the purpose section, we include the federal and the state laws. And KSA 72513 is one of the 4 laws where we state what the evidence-based practices are and what is required out of our state at-risk funds. What is on this page was what was in effect for the 2018-19 school year. Now on this page, we list all 4 of the laws that come into effect with our state at-risk funds, including 725153, which has had a slight change for 2019-20. And it states, similar to the previous law, that on or and after July 1st, 2019, such best practices shall include, but not be limited to, programs and services provided by state-based national nonprofit organizations. So in the near future, as we update this webpage, we will be adding those state-based national nonprofit organizations to our website. And again, if you look up online under Kansas state statutes for 725132, it provides definitions, and then 5151, 5152, and 5153 have the different sections that cover our K-12 state at-risk programs. We mentioned that on this page we have a section of general resources. Some of those examples include the What Works Clearinghouse, the Florida Center for Reading Research, the Kansas Technical Assistance System Network, and Kansas Star or InduStar, which includes a lot of the wise ways, which includes many best practices. Under each of the best practices web sections, which are listed below, we have a large amount in many of these sections of approved best practices. If you're looking for best practices that you want to use or are currently using in your district and are not able to find these, please submit those best practices to our team at ESSAquestions@ksde.org, along with the evidence base for those practices, and we will make sure to vet and put them on the website. So we get a question, well, how are we monitored that we're using these evidence-based practices for state at risk and federal programs? Well, under the Kansas Integrated Accountability System, which we talked about before, there will be questions in both the fiscal file review and the program assessment tied to this program. Also, through the local consolidated plan, the application you're assuring to the that you're using these for both federal and state practices. And then again, like we mentioned before, in the local consolidated annual report, you'll be answering specific questions about which kids were served, how many of those kids were served, how you determined the practices that were going to be used and the students that would be served, and a list of the evidence-based practices and the data to show how the Kansas State at-Risk funds helped your students improve academically. The next part of the day, we shared the definition of professional development from the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is Section 8101, Parts 42A and B. Because a lot of times we get questions from both our public and private schools to determine how we can use our Title I for PD, our Title II and IV for PD. And this is a good short read that describes, especially in A and B, it gives what is professional development, which follows with a lot of examples of what typically would qualify. So again, the definitions of it are in sections A and B, and then there is a list of what type of activities qualify underneath that. We then briefly talked on some updates and had some really good questions and discussions. And one of the things that came up and was very clear that we need to make sure that our districts and private schools understand that districts may not reimburse a private school. So in other words, no checks or purchase orders should be mailed from the district to the private school. That is a big red flag, as the USD or the LEA must be the fiscal agent. Now, in cases of travel to professional development, it is allowable for a district to reimburse the staff member for the travel. And as you see here, also the travel procedures and procurement procedures, we go by district policy. So you need to make sure that the private schools are aware of your procurement procedures and your travel procedures. Also, with consultation, we must make sure that this is ongoing throughout the school year and is timely and meaningful, so that our private schools have an understanding of what the requirements are of them, and that they cannot just choose, pay for something, and then expect to be reimbursed. The USDs or the LEAs must make payments to the vendors. Again, the LEAs may not reimburse a private school directly. We also talked about the professional development requirements under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. There's two. One is the annual requirement for district liaisons, which we have the opportunities listed here. They'll be in person through KSDE, McKinney-Vento seminars that are put on by our state coordinator, Maroon Ruhlman. She does these a few times a year. We also have the national conference, which is the first week of November, that typically we have about 20 districts send staff to, and that will count too. And we also have live or archived webinars from National Center for Homeless Education. If you have questions about other activities and if they would meet the annual requirement for district liaisons, please contact Maureen. Her phone number and email address is on this website. The other requirement is an awareness training. Every district must provide awareness training about McKinney-Vento Homeless to all staff. That includes our bus drivers, our nurses, our janitors, custodial staff, lunchroom workers, paraprofessionals. And one of the things we encourage as you train your staff is to make sure they're aware they are not identifying families or students. They would need to refer these families or students to the liaison to make the determination of whether they qualify for the program. There's a lot of resources through Infinitec that are available for this awareness training. Through Safe Schools training, we know there's a module in that. We've also provided the Worn Out Welcome Out Kansas on Doubled Up that can be provided. And we also provide fact sheets on our website that can be used for this. Every district is slightly different, but many districts have gone to the online webinars for their districts. And we just want to make sure that you're following up and making sure all your staff are participating. Because if you're monitored, and when the Kansas State Department of Education is monitored, we have to show records that these things are occurring. The next thing we talked about, because we've got a lot of questioning recently about title funding and how it's determined. And this page talks about how it's determined for the state level, because this has the biggest effect on what districts receive. It's based on the state per pupil expenditure, which is usually a 2 to 3 year lag. Currently, we're in the second year of our block grant, is what the United States Department of Education is looking at when they find and determine what our state per pupil expenditures are. Then they look at the census data, the number of children aged 5 to 17 at the federal poverty level according to the annual census sample, and the number of children above the federal poverty level, FPL, that are receiving basic TANF support. And in Kansas, that is 0, because Kansas does not provide TANF basic support to families above the federal poverty level. And then the fourth area is the number of children in foster care. And we use some of this similar information along with the audited free and reduced lunch counts to determine it for districts under 20,000 students. As you see on this page under data quality, the last bullet talks about the 2020 census and why it matters to you. On the next slide, we'll show you a website that takes you to the 2020 census. As you saw before, it is a major player in determining Title I funds, but poverty is also a major factor in how the United States Department of Education figures all of our ESEA funds, our IDA funds, our Perkins funds, and many others. So it's really important that we work with our communities to make sure that we do a good and accurate count, especially of our families that may be mobile, some of our migrant families, whether they're legal or illegal, we need to make sure they get counted. Our homeless families that may not be easy to find and locate. So we need to really make sure that we're getting all our Kansas students and families counted. Another thing we want to talk about is data quality. A lot of people look at the local consolidated plan and they don't think of that as a data resource. But we collect a large amount of data in the LCP and provide that to the federal government. The other area where we provide a lot of detail is from our KIDS system, our Kansas individual data on students. So we take all the data that districts report to us and put it together. So what you put in is what you get out. So if you provide us bad data, we're going to report your information with the bad data you provide us. So we just want to remind how important it is that you are putting the best quality data and the most accurate data you have in both the local consolidated plan and the Kansas individual data on students, and for any other resource that you provide data to the KSDE. Because again, what you put in is what you get out. This is the website for the 2020 census. We will also be sending out more information on the census and census collection through our various listservs at KSDE. We finished up the morning session with this quote from Hubert H. Humphrey that talks about the moral test of government. And we also talked about this, how that affects our local government, which would include our school districts. And that really we are looked at how we treat those that are in the shadows of life. And then we finished up the day in the afternoon with about an hour and a half discussions on the use of Kansas Star. Because hopefully, as of now, you are already aware that 2019-2020 school year is the year that all school-wide plans must be in Kansas Star. So by the start of the 2020-2021 school year, if you are a school-wide building to receive those flexibilities, you must have your school-wide plan in Kansas Star. You may also use Kansas Star if you're a TSI, CSI, or ATS building. You may also use it for redesign, and you may also use it for KSDE purposes. We want to be able to have one plan for all of these, if at all possible, and Kansas Star is a resource that allows it. But as a reminder, if you have a school-wide building that is not in Kansas Star, they must be in Kansas Star by the end of the 2019-2020 school year to continue having access to the flexibilities with the school-wide programs. We want to thank you again for all you do for Kansas students. On this last page, you have your contact information for Doug Boleen and myself, Tate Tateman. Please feel free to contact us or any of the other wonderful staff on the Special Education Title Services Programs team. Thank you and have a great day.